Today we welcome Dick Singer, Master Chair of Vistage International. He's also the president of RDS Associates LLC, a business coaching business. Dick has over 30 years of experience in the broadcasting industry, including 8 years as the owner of a group of small market radio stations. He spent the last 23 years as a Vistage Chair, and Vistage is the world's largest CEO coaching and peer advisory organization. Dick has 13 Vistage Chair Excellence Awards, achieved Master Chair designation in 2011. He received the Vistage Don Coat Memorial Award in 2024, and he currently chairs 3 Vistage groups. Dick spends his days with his wife, Noelle, and he's excited for his son, Jonathan, and daughter-in-law, Bethany, who are expecting their first child very soon. Dick, welcome to the Nice Doing Business With You podcast.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Yeah, we go back a good ways, so I was excited to talk to you about some of the things we have on the docket today.
Okay.
I always like to kick off just a little bit about your life and your career, a little more focus on the business, but you're welcome to include personal as well. I'm familiar with it, but for the folks who may not have met you, I think it would be a great kind of build up to help us understand what makes you such a good Vistage Chair these days.
Well, I started when I was younger, when I was, I guess, my early teens. I wanted to be in the broadcasting industry, and specifically, I wanted to be a disc jockey. I went to Temple University and majored in communications, radio, and TV, and that's where I realized being a disc jockey is not the best job in the world. Then I went on and got jobs, got a job as a mail boy in a local TV station, and then kind of worked my way up in that company, and I've kind of been in management and broadcasting, mostly television, sales, management, production. In fact, I directed Romper Room way back when. That's my claim to fame. And after about 30 years in that business, and during those years, you mentioned, I spent 8 years as an owner of a group of small market radio stations. But after about 30 years in that business, I was a regional manager for a large broadcasting group, and I got terminated. And decided that I was done with broadcasting. I had seen the changes in the organizations and the companies that own the broadcasters, and it was becoming way, way, way too bottom line focused. So I started doing a lot of networking, and in doing that, I met a lot of people. It was amazing. I did no networking with people in the broadcast industry. But I remember coming home, and I was doing probably somewhere between 7 and 10 networking meetings a week.
Wow. That's a lot.
Yeah. And I remember coming home one evening and saying to Noelle, my wife, I said, there's a world out there that I just never knew about, a world of business. I had been, as anybody in any industry, gets very narrowly focused on their industry, and that's where my focus had been for so many years. And I really became intrigued with what I was hearing from these outside businesses who had nothing to do with broadcasting. One of those people that I got to know pretty well, a fellow named Steve Halpern, called me one day and said, have you ever heard of, at the time it was Tech, it's now Vistage, same organization though. And I said, no. And he said, well, they're doing kind of consulting that you're doing. So I had already started doing some coaching and consulting.
This was RDS, companies. Right?
This was RDS, yeah. And he said, you ought to check this organization out because they're doing the kind of things that you're doing, but obviously on a much larger scale. And so I did. And I called them, and they're headquartered in San Diego. And I went through their screening process, which was pretty intense. And they accepted me, I guess you could say, as a Vistage Chair to come to training. And I went to San Diego and went through their training program, which I will tell you is world-class training, just world-class training. And somebody had said to me, go for the training, whether you become a chair or not, that training will stick with you the rest of your life. And
so this was about 23 years ago you went through the training?
Yeah, it was 2003.
Awesome.
2003.
So you had a stint as an owner in there for 8 of those years, and out of the 30 you were in the broadcast business. And that was before you got laid off from the bigger company, right?
Yeah.
So tell me how you went from employee to owner back to a higher level executive employee. What was that genesis like?
Well, it was interesting because I always liked being independent. One of the things I liked about being in sales, which I spent most of my broadcast career in sales, is that I was out on the street all day. I wasn't chained to a desk, and I really liked that freedom. And I also, at the point, I was working for a large sales representative company, national sales representative company that was owned by Cox Communications. And I found myself, I was in charge of all the national revenue for 10 major market television stations across the country. And I found myself having to answer to especially sales managers at these stations who I probably wouldn't have hired had I had the chance. And that became frustrating. And then a friend of mine and I were talking, and he's also in the broadcasting. And we talked about, let's see if we can raise some money and buy some radio stations. So that's what we did. We got together. He was my partner. And my wife is also a partner and was a partner in the business, as was his wife. But we went out and raised money. We put together a plan to buy radio stations, and we did. First one was in Lynchburg, Virginia. And then we moved west. We were in Arizona and actually Lake Tahoe. But we were able to, based on our presentation, we were able to raise money from some pretty high capital people in New York. Actually, one of the main people, it was a law firm, a big law firm in New York, but the lead person, the person that we dealt with, his name was Greenberg, actually was Ed Sullivan's attorney.
Oh, wow.
So it was pretty impressive. Interesting stories. Anyway, long story short, we bought these stations. The idea of buying Lake Tahoe was that it was a great market in terms of revenue, and the revenue from Lake Tahoe could support all the stations. And at that point, we had, I think, 6 or 7. Well, shortly after we closed on Lake Tahoe, and it was an AM and an FM, the area, California, went into a drought that lasted 6 years. And if you're familiar with Lake Tahoe, you know that probably 90% of the business in Lake Tahoe is retail. And it's all geared towards skiing and winter sports. Well, things got so bad because there was no snow that the retail turnover hit about 45%, which is huge. And so our business that we thought was going to be spectacular up there really turned into a serious issue in terms of the revenue.
It dried up.
It dried up. Not completely, but it dried
No
up.
pun intended.
Yes. Yeah. In fact, at Lake Tahoe, it's interesting. If you've ever been there, there were actually beaches because of this drought. The lake went down 11 feet. There were beaches on that lake that had never existed before. There were long boat docks on that lake that were completely out of the water,
So your main product at this time is you're selling radio spots?
Yeah, we're selling advertising.
TV as well, or mostly just radio?
Most of my sales experience was in television.
Okay.
But selling radio and TV, it's not too different. You're really selling an intangible, no matter which one you're selling. Anyway, reached the point where we couldn't afford to maintain these stations. And my wife and I, Noelle, we were living in Kingman, Arizona, where we owned an AM and an FM. Kingman is about 100 miles southeast of Las Vegas. Did a lot of business in Las Vegas for the radio station. Anyway, we were going to declare bankruptcy, and we were personally guaranteed for these stations. So we came very, very, very close to having to declare personal bankruptcy when a gentleman showed up out of the blue and said, "I'm interested in buying your radio stations." And we said, "Well, we're interested in selling them."
It's fortuitous timing.
Yeah. So, and then he said, I'll do this only if you and your partner will come to work for me, and you'll be on my board, and you'll help me run the company. So we said, that's fine.
That sounds like a great outcome.
Well, it sounded like a great outcome. Anyway, he bought the station, so it took us off the hook. We went to work for him. He turned out to be the epitome of a micromanager, to the point where he'd fly into Las Vegas and drive down to Kingman. And he would listen to the radio station, the FM station, on the way to Kingman, and he would get to the station, and the first thing he would say is, "Why did you play that song?" He's like, he's nitpicking the songs that we were playing, and he knew that this was a syndicated service that we were running on the FM, so we had no control over what music they played, and he knew that. Anyway, my partner left, and then I decided to leave as well. And I'm originally from Philadelphia. I made a couple of phone calls. We ended up back in Philadelphia working for Knight Ridder, which was a huge newspaper company, no longer in existence. And they owned the Philadelphia Inquirer and the Miami Herald. They were putting on a television news program using the facilities of the Inquirer, and they hired me as director of sales and marketing.
Like the Inquirer tabloid magazine?
No, the Philadelphia Inquirer.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Philadelphia Inquirer and the Philadelphia Daily News were the two newspapers there. And they wanted to dabble in broadcast. So we launched this 10 o'clock news program on one of the TV stations in Philadelphia. And what we found out about a week before we actually went on the air, we found out that all the reporters that we were going to be working with from the Philadelphia Inquirer were in the union. And the union came to us literally a week before we were supposed to launch and said, unless you guys join the union, our people are not going to work with you. And we had not hired. We hired a few reporters, but not many because we were going to rely on them. Anyway, fortunately, some of the Inquirer reporters said, the hell with the union, we're going to work with you. So we finally launched the program. It did not do well, unfortunately. And about 2 years into it, the board of directors of Knight Ridder came and said, we're going to probably shut this down or sell it to the TV station, which they eventually did. And they said to me, we really like you. We'd like to see if we can keep you on board. But obviously, we're not broadcasters. However, the Miami Herald has an interest in maybe somehow reaching out into broadcast. And are you willing to come down there and work for us there, helping us to do that? Because nobody down there knows anything.
Working in a sales capacity again?
No, helping them to launch a radio news program.
Okay.
So I went down there. I commuted from Philadelphia every week for about 48 weeks. It reached the point, my joke always was, you're traveling too much when the lady who drives the national car rental bus knows you by name. And that's really what it got down to.
And where was this back and forth to?
Miami.
To Miami. Okay.
Anyway, it was an interesting experience. We actually launched, it took a while, but we launched a 3-hour morning radio, Spanish language radio news program. And I hired the anchors. It was on 5 days a week for 3 hours. I negotiated with the Spanish language radio station to put it on the air, the whole thing. And what's interesting is I don't speak one word of Spanish. So it was a great experience for me. Anyway, at some point, I decided to go back to Philly permanently, not to keep commuting. But then somebody who worked for Barry Diller's organization, I don't know if you ever heard of Barry Diller, but
no.
Barry Diller at one point, he was the creative side of launching of the Fox TV network. It was Rupert Murdoch's money, but it was Barry Diller's ideas and creativity that launched that. And he owned a number of websites, mostly travel websites too. A well-known man in the broadcast and movie business. Anyway, his company, they were launching a new TV station in Miami. There was no chance to be a network affiliate, so it was going to be all original programming. We produced 10 hours of original programming every single day. And we were located in South Beach, so it was not a bad place to have to work. They hired 175 people. They had a full-blown news program. They hired all kinds of photographers because they were following reporters out on the street doing their stories. And then we had a sports program on at night. But a year into it, the revenue just did not come. I was director of sales and marketing, so I'll take the hit for that. But it was a very difficult sale because we had no ratings, and everything is ratings driven. And then I got a call from a major television broadcasting company, from their CEO, who I had known many years ago. And long story short, he hired me to be the regional manager for 7 of their broadcast stations. And that's what actually brought us to Pittsburgh.
Oh, and that was with
Sinclair Broadcasting.
Sinclair. Okay.
Yeah,
that's the one I remember hearing about.
Yeah, they own Fox 53 and Channel 22.
Yeah. So quick side road. I know this from personal conversations in the past. You did a quick stint in the U.S. Army as well, correct? Was that in between Temple and
yeah, I did. I was in the Air Force Reserve.
Oh, Air Force
I went to
Reserve.
Lackland for training.
Been there too.
Yeah, and that was a really interesting experience in retrospect.
Yeah,
and not when you're going through it.
So how long were you in the reserves?
I think 4 years.
4.
Yeah, and I was a warehouse. It's interesting because I was originally they originally brought me in and said you have an opening for an air policeman. And I said, fine, I'll take it, whatever it is. And so I joined. I went to basic training, and my ankles swelled up from all the marching and running. And one of the doctors there that I went to see said, where are you going for your training? I said, Air Police School. He said, you can't go to Air Police School. He said, and you probably know this, Chris, but Air Police School's training is a lot rougher than basic. And he said, your ankles just won't be able to deal with it. So they sent me back home to their base in Willow Grove, Pennsylvania, which was actually a naval air station. And I became a warehouseman.
Supply troop.
Yep, exactly.
Nice.
And I did that, and then had my reserve stint, my 2 weeks and my weekend a month and all that stuff. It was before I graduated from Temple. They called me in. but I was in my senior year, so I
These
was
are college years-ish.
ish, yeah.
Any good life lessons you picked up from your time in the Air Force that helped you later in business or your life?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I learned through that and through a lot of other things is that you really need to maintain your sense of humor, especially when you're in basic training, because you can't do or say anything without permission. I remember when when they finally let us go onto the patio, which is right below what they called the flight, the barracks. And it was the first time I ever drank a Dr. Pepper, and I hadn't had a soft drink in many, many weeks in basic. And it was like manna from heaven. It was just incredible. But anyway, so that was a good experience. And again, I think you have to have a sense of humor in virtually anything you do. I think it's really important. That led to the broadcasting jobs. After a couple of years with this group, Sinclair, I got terminated. And in talking to Noel, and our son Jonathan at that point was about 7 or 8 years old, and we didn't want to move him. He was establishing a group of friends in school, the whole thing. So I said, okay, well, I'm not really interested in going back into broadcasting anyway. And I started doing all this networking. And that networking led me to Vistage, or Tech at the time. And I went through their training, which was world-class, in June of 2003. Launched my first group in November of 2003 with 8 members. And then I had as many as 5 groups. I was at one point the best practice chair for, I think, 9 years. I was the best practice chair for Western Pennsylvania and Northern Ohio. And the best practice chair is kind of the chair of the chairs. And up until this past December, I had 5 groups. I'm down to 3. I decided to cut back. My wife and I want to do a little more traveling, so I cut back. And that kind of brings us up to date.
Yeah, and I think we first met maybe 2009 or 10.
Something like that, yeah.
I joined one of your groups in 2011, I believe, was when I first started. Yeah, the key group, and it's been wonderful for me. So I know for the last couple decades, 2.5 decades, Vistage has been sort of your main life when it comes to business, at least outside of all the travel you and Noel do.
Well, look, when you love what you're doing, time flies. I mean, it's just, and I love what I do.
Yeah.
So I go out every day and I come home at night and I know that I've helped somebody that day.
Yeah. So for people who don't know what Vistage is, can you share a little bit more? I mean, obviously I did the intro, but I mean, it means something different to people who are in it, I think, and what keeps us coming back. But can you share, after chairing groups for so long, the value prop and what it is?
Well, Vistage has been around since 1957. It was started by a former CEO in Milwaukee named Bob Norse, who had this brilliant idea based on what he had learned as a CEO, because, as you know, there's no schools for CEOs, there's no college classes for CEOs. And he realized that what he had learned about being a CEO, he had learned from talking to other CEOs. So he got this brainstorm about putting this group together of non-competing leaders of companies who could meet every month and help each other work through the issues that they can't talk to anybody else about. And as you know, there are quite a bit of those issues that you can't talk to anybody else about. And so that was the first group of eight members in Milwaukee. And Vistage grew. We're now in, I think, close to 40 countries around the world, with over 45,000 members. It's a membership organization. But in essence, what we do is there's 2 things that I always point to. One is the isolation that the leader of a company deals with, because there's a lot of things that you can't talk to your employees about. And there's some things you can't talk at home about. So you're really kind of isolated. I always use the example of, if you come into the office in a bad mood and you go into your office as the CEO and you just close the door, the first thing that people are going to be thinking is, either I'm going to lose my job or we're shutting down. And it may be that you're just upset because you had a flat tire on the way to work. But that's the isolation that you have, because you really can't talk to people. So there's a sense of isolation and the chance to really share these issues with other people who are in the same position as you are. And the reality is that the issues that members of Vistage groups have, it's never about how to make a better widget. It's always about people, process, sales, growth.
Yeah.
vision, where we're going, exit strategies, whatever.
Yeah.
That's what it's always about.
One of the biggest themes I tend to see, and obviously there's NDAs everybody in the group signs, so you can't get into too many juicy tidbits of what's going on inside of other group members' companies. But a common theme we hear over and over and over is usually it's just communication.
Yep.
And skills and tools and helping each other build up the vocabulary, right, to have
Right.
those difficult conversations, whether it's a coworker, subordinate. In some cases, some groups, it's actually a superior, someone above you in the company. How do you talk about what you need to talk about and get to a happy outcome? That tends to be a major theme, I think.
It is. And it's, the reality is that people want to know how they're doing. And even if they're doing not well, they want to know what they can do to improve. And many leaders, many managers have a reluctance to get into those kinds of conversations because they don't like confrontation. And in Vistage, we don't call it confrontation. As you know, we call it carefrontation.
Right.
Because you do it caringly. But those conversations are really important to have. And what happens is you have an underperforming employee. Instead of trying to help them get better, you just don't tell them what's going on. And then you either do one of two things. Either you move them to another department. I call that transfiring. Or you terminate them. I did a written piece a few years ago talking about when you're getting ready to let somebody go, there's a process you have to follow. And one is writing out a performance improvement program. This is what you have to do to save your job. Well, the thing that I wrote was, let's do the performance improvement document when you hire them. Let's show them what has to happen here, even though they get a job description and everything else. But this is more specific in terms of the what they call the PIP. And so I tell them, it'd be interesting to just do that when you hire people so they know what's expected of them. People just want to know how they're doing, what's expected of them. And most people want to do better, but they need guidance and they need mentoring.
They need to know what success looks like.
Right.
So who's Vistage a good fit for? Can you talk a little bit about, I think companies, it becomes more valuable when you have a team, but I know there might even be some entry level thresholds. And then for those who might not fit those criteria, at the end of the day, this is kind of a combination of coaching, leadership, peer networking, that sort of thing. Can you talk about that in general, like how you've seen it help and transform business owners and founders' lives, or even key executives?
Well, we have a number of groups. We have what we call a CE group, which is large companies for CEOs. The group is
Chief executives.
Chief executives. So we have a small business CEO group for also the chief executives of those small businesses. We have a key group, which is for really the next level of employee, the chief financial officer.
These are key execs.
Key execs, right. And then below that, we have what we call an advancing leader program and an emerging leader program, which is really for people in supervisory positions to learn about leadership. Especially the emerging leader program is really much more of a curriculum-based program. And the advancing leader is a little bit more about how to deal with problems, how to do one-to-ones, how to, those kinds of things, and how to deal with issues. And how to work across silos. But the criteria in terms of companies for the CEO groups, the revenue has to be usually somewhere around 5 million, bottom. And it can go as high as, 300 million. I mean, I had somebody in one of my groups at one point whose company was $1.5 billion.
I think I know who that was.
Yeah, and there are some people like that in Vistage groups, but we're mostly small and medium-sized businesses.
Right.
But again, it's a chance for them to talk about the things that they can't talk to anybody else about. They also get one-on-one coaching. So I meet with my members every month, one-on-one in that meeting, and that usually goes from anywhere from an hour to 2 hours.
And mine's going to be in about 20 or 30 minutes.
It is. It is. We could do it on the air if you want.
I think we'll go off camera for some things.
But the point is that in those one-to-one meetings, my job as the chair is not to control the meeting. It's really got to be the members' meeting. And so my question is, okay, what's keeping you up at night? What's giving you those sleepless nights? What's really grating at your gut? So that we can really surface the real issues and get to what I call the mineral rights of those issues.
Yeah.
And my job, the chair's job, is to ask questions. It's not to give answers.
Right. I was just going to say, you have so much knowledge and intuition, but I've been in the hot seat many times for our group when we're processing an issue, and to have 10, 12, or 15 other, people who've been there, done that, and in many, if not most cases, have built much bigger companies. Some of my problems, they're small potatoes. They solved a long time ago, but they don't just give you the answer. They're not prescriptive.
Right.
They want to make sure they get all the context. I think that's called, that methodology that you use, is that called the Gestalt method? Is that what they teach?
It's much more of a Socratic method.
Okay. Yeah, talk about that a little bit, because when you first experienced that, like especially like a new group member when I was new 12 years ago, it was almost frustrating. Like, can we just get to the point? Why do we have to play by all these rules to process an issue? So can you talk a little bit about that method that you use and why it's important? And it really helps take advantage of having a smart group of people rather than just sit there and people flinging possible solutions at you. Like, no, that doesn't fit. I can't, I tried that on, it doesn't work. Here's why, right?
And that's what makes the Vistage group so interesting, because it's a diverse group of companies. You cannot have a competitor in the room.
Right.
So they come from much different perspectives. And so when you have an issue and you bring an issue to that group, you're getting the benefit of all kinds of perspectives that you would never get in a industry group, for example, like the automobile industry has the 20 groups.
Right. And not to mention, people are apprehensive about sharing anything in front of their competitors that could, let cats out of the bag or give away some trade secrets or, competitive advantages, that sort of thing.
Right. And everything, as you know, is totally confidential. And that's really the foundation of the Vistage groups is confidentiality. But again, you're learning to look at your issue from a whole different perspective. And the other thing is that our Socratic method is, before we get to any response or solutions or whatever you're looking for in terms of that issue, we have to ask the questions to get all the information out on the table. And that's the Socratic method. You ask questions.
Right.
You ask questions. Because oftentimes the member who has the issue may not know what the real issue is. That may not really be their issue.
I've seen that happen many times. We say that a lot.
Yeah.
Like, can we redefine the issue?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then we'll redefine that issue and ask some more questions. And then the members give feedback to the member, either solutions.
That's cathartic to watch sometimes when you see someone realize, like, the thing that I thought was the problem is actually a symptom.
Right.
And the problem, now that I've identified it, is more, what's the word, tackleable, but way more strategic. Right?
Yeah. And so as I use the term mineral rights, you've got to get down to the mineral rights of the issue, and you've got to get the members down, because everybody wants to be up here.
Yeah.
They want to be in the head side, but you really need to get them down to the gut.
Right. Part of it all.
Yeah. Because those were the mineral rights. That's where you really uncover the real issues.
Right. And I've been in your groups for years now, 2 different groups. I started in a key group. Now I'm in the small business owners group. So when you started doing this 23 years ago, and you went to chair school, right? As all chairs do. But I would assume that during that 23 years, you've refined your game, right? Like, you're probably safe to say, best chair you've ever been now versus when you first started. Do you think that if you could go back in time, you would have any key nuggets or bits of wisdom you'd want to impart on yourself as you first started out as a chair?
You're absolutely correct about that. Look, you learn as you go. A friend of mine who was a retired chair once said, you have to realize that the first 7 years is malpractice. Because you have to learn how to use the technique, the Socratic technique.
Right.
A
lot of chairs were members for a long time.
Some were, a lot were,
And that probably gives them a little bit of background and context.
Yes, it does.
A leg up, right?
Yeah.
And you were never a member.
No. And so, it takes time to really understand that. And the other thing that, as a chair, your job is not to be in there asking the questions. That's for the group to do. And as you know, the only time I'll ask a question is if I think that we're getting off track.
Yeah.
And then I'll jump
you're
in there.
Kind of the maestro.
So, yeah.
And
so I'm the
rules.
facilitator, right? And make sure everybody's following the rules. And getting a bunch of CEOs to follow the rules is not easy.
and from Vistage group to Vistage group, not asking you to indict any of your peers. I know people in Vistage in other parts of the country, like some of our clients, or like Water Cooler Talk, other agency owners I talk to that are also in Vistage. And I've heard some of them say the reasons they keep going back to Vistage are different than the reasons I keep going back to Vistage. And I always come back to, we're spoiled. We have one of the best chairs in the world, right? So I got to toot your horn a little bit. The award you just won was a very major one that,
Mhm.
You've won the Chair of the Year award numerous times, their
Mhm.
Master Chair award, and then also this the Don Cope Award,
Right.
which that was a lovely dinner. We all got to attend as your members.
Yeah.
But as I talk to some people in other Vistage groups, the things they say they keep going back for versus the things I keep coming back for, like not the same, which makes me wonder if it's,
So what do
you
they
know,
keep coming back for?
oh, I think some of them are there, not really the right reason necessarily, but sometimes they're there just to sell, right? Like they're there for networking exclusively, or they're there just for the speakers. That's the main thing that keeps them back. For me, it's the conversations and
Right.
the issue processing is probably my favorite thing. Having that, it's almost like an advisory board. It really is an advisory board.
It
I
is.
consider it one.
Yeah.
And
It's a board of directors really that you can talk to about anything.
right.
And if you have a normal board of directors, you can't talk to them about everything.
Right.
But in terms of those other chairs, look, I've always said that if there's enough issues, then everything else on the agenda goes out the window, except for the speakers, because in most cases they've flown in.
Right. We do have some great speakers.
Yeah, and we have great speakers. Vistage has a very large speakers bureau. I think we have well over 1,000 speakers in that bureau. And I would say 90% of them are keynote caliber speakers. But when they come to a Vistage group, as you know, they don't just come in there and do a speech. They come in and they do a 2 to 3 hour interactive workshop.
Right.
And that's what keeps people involved in
And the
that.
topics, by the way, aren't always exclusively about business.
No.
Sometimes they're about personal development
Yep.
or your health.
Exactly.
That sort of thing, which I
Exactly.
enjoy those as well.
Yeah.
So I guess the questions, the line of questions I was kind of getting into earlier weren't so much to, ask you to indict other Vistage members, like, or chairs, I should say. It's just a theory, right? And the theory is you've been in the only Vistage groups I've ever been. The 2 groups I've ever been in, you were the chair of both.
Mhm.
But I feel like the chair is really, really, really important. Like the quality experience you get at Vistage comes down a lot in many parts to the chair.
Yeah.
So I guess the question, you kind of answered it, is chair school seems like a great place to start. Do you agree with that statement that a good chair is what makes the group, or is there kind of more to it?
No, I agree with you. I think, look, to the members, the chair is Vistage. I mean, Vistage is headquartered in San Diego, and it's a large organization, but they have very little interaction with the corporate side of it. So we are Vistage to the members. And I think the chair has got to bring value to those meetings. I mean, that's my job, is to make sure that we are covering the issues that we need to cover, that we're following up on those issues. Because as you know, when you have an issue that you bring to the group, when you come back the following month, you have to report back on
Right.
what you've done about that issue. So there's accountability. And so, to me, the way you bring value to the group is focus on the issue processing. Make sure we get as many issues as we can, because you can't do, if you have 16 people in a group, which your group has, you can't do 16 issues in in a day.
No, I mean, I think typically we get 3, maybe 4 max.
3 to 5 usually. But you want to make sure you get the important issues out on the table. And then the speakers, the speakers are a good draw for some, not for all, but for many members.
And the food. Food's pretty good too.
Depending on who's hosting.
We like breakfast and lunch.
But yeah, I to me, my whole thing is that, I go in the morning, make sure that when I come out in the afternoon, it's over, that I can feel like I brought value to these people, that because I can remember one time, more than one time, but I remember a member saying to me, at the end of a meeting, he said, when I was coming into town today, he said, I started thinking about all the stuff that's on my desk and everything that I've got to get done. And I was thinking to myself, maybe I should just skip the meeting and go to the office. And I decided, no, I'm going to go to the meeting. He said, and now that I've been here the whole day and it's over, I want to tell you that was a great decision that I made, because you get a lot out of not just your own issues, but other people's issues.
Right.
That's how you learn.
Yeah. That's a great point. That's worth articulating.
Right.
Some of the best meetings I've gone to, I didn't process an issue.
Hmm.
I didn't think I had an issue. And then I hear, all three of the issues or four of the issues that came up that day. I'm like, I actually have that issue as well. I can't wait to hear this. I'm
Right.
going to ask him some questions to help clarify this issue that might give me a little extra
Right.
insight and visibility into my own.
Yeah. And that's, again, to me, that's the most important part of a Vistage meeting is the issue processing. And I think if other chairs or other members are saying that they're not doing that, I think then the members are not getting the full value of Vistage.
Yeah, I think that's a good summary. The issue processing is probably the most interactive and eye-opening piece of,
Yeah.
of being a group member. So a couple questions we tend to ask everyone that comes on the Nice Doing Business With You podcast. Or what are your thoughts just around AI in general, how it's affecting what you do? Are you using AI? Do you plan to use AI? I know it's a little bit more of a stretch, I would guess, compared to what like we do, for example. But what are your thoughts there?
I think the vast majority of my members are concerned about AI and are looking at AI and trying to get their heads around it. And AI, as you know, probably better than anybody, changes virtually every day. And I read somewhere the other day that 2 years from now, it'll be 100 times bigger than, or have 100 times more capability than it does today because of the way it keeps growing.
It's like Moore's Law in effect, if you're familiar.
Right. Yes. And so I think AI is really important. I think companies have got to learn how to use AI efficiently and productively. And I know that most of my members are thinking about it, are exploring it, are looking at how it can help them. Some are using it on a regular basis. Some are just putting their toe in the water. But look, it's going to be there and it's going to get bigger. And I think if you don't embrace it, then that may be a detriment to you and your company.
AI in a leadership role is scary. AI for helping, I think, with strategy is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Maybe doing a little data analysis or using it to, clean up some ideas.
Right.
Seems like a good use case. But have you heard of any other members getting big into using AI as like in strategic development or anything that might even
Not
intersect
yet,
leadership?
not yet, but I think they're beginning to look at it. And one of the things that Vistage, as you know, does for its members, they've just put out a strategic planning program that you're aware of.
Mhm.
It took them 2.5 years to make that happen. They consulted with a lot of people, hundreds of people, to put together a really good strategic planning program, which is now available to members. And it makes it somewhat simplified, but it answers the questions that have to be answered. So Vistage responds to those needs of the members as much as they can. In terms of AI, I think Vistage is going to be having, we've got speakers on AI.
Mm-hmm. Seen a few.
Yep.
A few really. One in particular is a dear friend of mine and is fascinating every time we get to see his latest workshop.
Yeah, Dave Nelson.
Yeah.
But anyway, we're getting more speakers on AI. I think Vistage is starting to embrace AI as well. I'm sure it won't be long. In fact, I think you already can go onto the website and get some information and some lessons in AI, so to speak. So yeah, it's there. I mean, look, it's there. It can be a benefit if it's used the right way. And I think people are crazy if they don't get their arms around it.
One other question I'd like to ask everyone that comes on to do an interview with me. So when you run your Vistage group, it's kind of like your own little business, right? Like you're responsible for getting members, keeping members, retention, I'm sure is something that's important to you. So with the theme of the show, like a Nice Doing Business With You, how do you get customers, in your case, members? How do you keep them loyal? Like what are some of your go-to moves? How have you built up your groups? Is it a lot of networking, referrals? Do you do any marketing or advertising? Mostly word of mouth at this point. Tell me about your sales strategy for yourself.
Well, my sales strategy, I spent most of my life in the broadcasting industry selling an intangible. And Vistage, in some ways, is an intangible, especially when you first start because you don't have a group and you're trying to build one. But, I think I've reached the point after all this time that, first of all, I love to network. So I do networking meetings still. I try to have at least one, if not two, a week networking meetings. And in those meetings, I talk to people if they're potential members. What I want to find out is who they are, what their business is, how their business runs, and what issues they're having to deal with. Where's the pain? And then I will kind of talk to them about what Vistage can do. I don't believe in trying to sell Vistage. I certainly explain it to people and how it works, but they have to be willing to become a member. They have to be willing to be vulnerable. They have to be willing to be part of a group like that. So, my members today are virtually all referral after all these years, and I get referrals all the time. You have a brand new member of your group who was a referral. That's kind of the way it goes.
Awesome. All right. Well, I think that was pretty all encompassing. Thank you for joining me.
Oh, thank you.
If you enjoyed the show, I guess first and foremost, if someone is interested in learning more about Vistage, whether they're local or not, why don't you tell them how they could do that?
Well, you can reach me. Email is dicksinger85@gmail.com. Phone number is 412-576-8049. Call me. I'm more than happy to.
You're putting the email and the phone number out there. That's old school.
Yeah. And I'm very happy to. And Vistage also has a great website, vistage.com.
Yeah.
You can go on the website. You can learn a lot about Vistage. The members have a separate Vistage website, as you know.
Right.
But for the public, there is a website you can learn a lot more about Vistage on that website.
Yep. It's a great organization. If you're local, people can come visit the group as well, if they fit the criteria, of course. I'm also happy to share any feedback or information about my experience with Vistage and our group if you're the right fit for it. So thank you for listening to our show today. If you enjoyed it, please share with a friend or leave us a comment, follow us, join our newsletter, do all the things. Thanks, Dick, for coming and spending some time with me.
Thank you.
Looking forward to doing our monthly one-to-one after this.
Good.